Hello, welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy. Let's see. I have a lot to talk about this week. I think partly because I've been sick, I've had a cold, so I feel like I've done a lot of reading. Harry, the foster dog, is keeping me busy. The Women's Prize long list came out this week. I was incredibly disappointed in the Women's Prize long list last year. I think I tried 4 or 5 different books, and I think I DNF'd all but one. And I was like, I'm done. And I thought, let me wait until 2024, reevaluate. And I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, there are 4 or 5 titles that I'm interested in. I'll try them. But I feel like if I end up DNFing them all again, I think I'm breaking up with the Women's Prize. I think I will have 0 interest in it going forward. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I hear several people talk about some titles being amazing, and I hope I pick them up and I feel like they're great. I'm just slightly suspicious. And what I can't tell is it my reading tastes have changed, or has the Women's Prize taken a nosedive? I suspect it's my taste has changed because I'm actually kind of excited for the International Booker, which the long list I think is being announced next week or this coming week or 2 weeks. I can't remember the timing, but anyway, I'm kind of excited for that, which I've never would have said, oh, I'm an International Booker fan. I'm not a Booker fan, but I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm changing. So anyway, so, you know, I don't have any super urgency. A number of the Women's Prize books, because they tend to be a little more on the commercial side than literary side, I feel like. I do better with those kinds of books on audio. So I put a couple titles on hold on audio when I could. And, you know, like I said, I will see how it goes and, you know, decide how I feel about things. What else have I been doing? Okay, so I grabbed this, The Miller's Daughter by Emma Zimmerman. This is a cookbook. And I picked this up from at the recommendation of Emily from Book Cougars. And she talked about this book and making the baked overnight oats from this book, which I've also made and is very good. I also made the granola from here, which was super delicious. And my husband finally agreed he will stop buying granola, that I can make granola from now on. But this has a number of recipes from various different wheats, einkorn, oats, rye, farro, you know, various different grains. But in the back, she also lists a number of small, you know, I don't want to say boutique mills, but, you know, yeah, boutique mills throughout the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And so I looked, and there are 2 in Washington State. So I'm very excited. So I'm working through my farro. My wheat is gone. I still have a bunch of rye left. I have a little bit of farro left. So anyway, I'm working through my grains here at home so I can order some locally milled grains. I'm super excited about that. So thank you, Emily. I've gone down an ancient grain, deep dark rabbit hole. What else? So what have I actually read? Lots of surprises this week. It sounds weird to say a book was better than expected because it feels like you should be going into every book like this is going to be 5-star amazing. But I don't. But I had some books that I was actually surprised they were way better than I thought. So first up is Calla by Colin Walsh. This I read for both the Irish Readathon as well as March Mystery Madness. This is a literary thriller. It's a literary mystery thriller. But anyway, it is about a group of 6 friends and who are teenagers in 2003, and Calla, one of the girls, 3 girls and 3 boys, Calla, one of the girls, disappears and nobody knows what happened to her. And then in present day, Calla's body is found. And this happens at the same time that Helen, one of the friends, is returning to town for her mother's second marriage. And Joe is returning to town. He's a musician, and he's returning to his hometown, essentially to deal with his alcoholism. And Mush is another one of the group who never left town. And so this book bounces back and forth between present day events and 2003. And I'm not a huge mystery person. And so this really kind of hit the sweet spot for me in that there is a mystery going on, but to me that felt kind of secondary to the characters. You get the characters of today, but you get the characters of the past. And what's interesting in the past is you see how the dynamics of the group change and evolve. So how the group forms, and again, how those dynamics change. I just thought that was really, really interesting. And then in the present day, the what happened to Calla is solved, but you also can see Mush, Helen, and Joe, as things happen, them sort of struggling with their guilt over how they may have contributed to Calla's disappearance. So this was super character heavy, and I really, really enjoyed this book. Another one that was better than I was expecting is Memory of Water by Itaranta. She's Finnish, but she's bilingual. So I think this book was actually written in English. This is a little bit of an older book. And it's a science fiction, and it actually was nominated for several science fiction awards, both in the United, in the English world as well as the Finnish world. So this again was a lot more literary than I normally think of science fiction as being. This is, climate, fiction, my classic, cli-fi dystopian. But this is, at some point in the future, we have the Noria is our main character, and she lives in the Scandinavian Union, which is controlled by China. And she is a tea master's apprentice. And what I think is, this is not a very long book, and what I think is interesting is there's no record of the past, meaning our world. Everybody knows there was oil wars, and there was a transitional period between the past and their current, but nobody kind of knows those details. And so what's nice about that is as a reader and from an author perspective, she doesn't get bogged down with explaining how did China take over? How did all the Scandinavian countries become one country? What were the oil wars? Blah, 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 blah. She doesn't get bogged down in any of that. She can really focus on Noria's story, which I thought actually was kind of brilliant. But I can also see, like, that would drive my friend Lori crazy. Like, she would need to know. But basically, there's no snow anymore up in Scandinavia. There's there's water rationing and water crimes going on. And Noria is a tea master, which of course revolves around water. Like, in order to brew tea, you need water. And so there's a lot about the tradition of making tea, and performing the tea ceremony, and images of water, and water as metaphor. It's interesting. And things get worse, and you learn very quickly that Noria has access to a secret spring that has been the tea master's secret. And so there's a lot about the burden of secrets that of course, once you share the secret, everybody's gonna know, right? But there's, she has this burden of keeping this secret from her best friend, whose sister is ill and dying, who they're really struggling because they don't have enough water. Nobody can really bathe anymore, and Noria doesn't have any of these troubles. So anyway, it was interesting. And it's part coming of age. Noria is struggling to follow this very traditional tea master path, or should she disclose the water and move on to something else? How does she forge her own path? And of course, her parents have very different perspectives. So again, it was just an interesting look at secrets, again, coming of age, a lot of beautiful writing about water. Again, this is way better than I was expecting. So interesting. It's like barely science fiction-y, you know, and again, I think part of that is because the author does not get bogged down in explaining how did the world get to be where it is. Then I read for the Irish Readathon, The Magician's Wife by Brian Moore. So I picked this up because The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn is one of probably my favorite books. Loved that book. And this is one of his later books and not considered one of his best books. And I can kind of see why. Like, this is no Judith Hearn. But it's a very good book. This takes place in 1856. Henri Lambert and his wife, Emmeline, are invited to, you know, some house party or something of Napoleon III's. And it comes out that they want the Lamberts to go to Algeria. There are various religious figures in Algeria who have an enormous amount of political power, and one of them is becoming very powerful and is threatening. There's concerns from the French that he's going to declare a jihad to try and remove the French from Algeria. And the French aren't ready. They want to land their armies in, you know, the coming year and colonize Algeria once and for all. And this religious leader is somewhat of a faith healer, and you know, he has these mystical abilities. And so the French's idea is to send Lambert, a magician, to Algeria to basically show the Algerians, well, we have a religious mystic too, and ours is more powerful than yours, and hopefully convince the Algerians not to declare a jihad and buy the French time before they send their armies. This is based on a true event that occurred. And what I think is so good in this book is there are layers upon layers of illusion and deception. You know, you obviously have the French attempting to deceive the Algerians, but then you have, on a more personal level, Emmeline is, you know, her husband is being courted. She's being courted, and Napoleon and this colonel, you know, are both flirt with her. And so she's like, is this genuine, or are they just trying to win me over? There are some things that come out about their marriage, and so you wonder how much is an illusion there. You know, the mystic that the Algerians have, you know, how much of his power is an illusion. There's just, anyway, lots of interesting stuff in here, and it's just, it's well done. I was kind of expecting like 3-star based on the reviews that I was reading in Goodreads, and I actually thought this book was really well done. Yeah, pleasant surprise, and my journey with Brian Moore will continue. The Bead Workers with Beth Piatote. This, I finally had my conversation with Melinda over at Web of Stories. This is the first book in our project this year to read books by Indigenous authors in the Pacific, from the Pacific Northwest. So this is a short story collection. A lot of these short stories are about friendship. We both suspect that the very last story, Antigone, which is based on Antigone, felt a lot more worked than the other stories. And she talks about in her acknowledgments that was performed. It's written as a play, but that was actually performed and workshopped. And so there was clearly, that was probably the story that got her the book deal. But that was just super interesting. And Melinda and I had a great conversation. I think like what a lot of, good literature should do is we talked about these stories briefly and then we launched into all this other conversation. Talking about loss of language, loss of cultural practices, the role of museums in preserving, stealing, appropriating, Indigenous artifacts. And the story of Antigone, she's really, part of it is talking about the conundrum by tribes of, do you take your artifacts back? Do you allow them to stay in museums, but partner with those museums to control the narrative being told about those artifacts? And wrestling with that very relevant issue that we're struggling with today in the United States. So anyway, that was a great conversation, and we are doing our next read. We're doing every other month, so the next one will be in May. And the last thing that I finished was Under the Skin, The Hidden Toll of Racism on American Lives and on the Health of Our Nation by Melinda Villarosa. This was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize last year, and I picked this up, and this is pretty much what it's describing. She really emphasizes race is not a proxy for poverty, that controlling for poverty, race has an impact on health outcomes, and that Black Americans in a number of ways are less healthy than white Americans. She talks a lot about maternal and infant mortality, mental health, talking about the effects of pollution, air and water pollution, and how Blacks are more impacted. And this was sort of written right after COVID, so also talking about COVID and how COVID impacted Black communities more harshly than white communities, predominantly white communities. And, you know, really talking about the weathering of the everyday stress of being Black in America impacts the mental health and well-being and physical health and well-being of Black Americans. I worked in healthcare myself, so a lot of what she was talking about in here was not new information to me, but I think she presents this in a very digestible, readable way, and really there's a lot of data in here because the data is actually very overwhelming. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of data showing this. And she has a lot of personal anecdotes from herself as well as other people to illustrate the points that she's talking about. So this is very readable, very digestible for the layperson to follow along. So this book was very well done. So that's what I read. It's a lot this week. I am feeling better, so we'll see what next week brings. But yeah, so I'll keep you posted on what I pick up this week, and we'll see what I finish. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.